Well, welcome to Education Fast Forward, and thank you for giving up your time today, not just here in London, but all around the world, from Brisbane to Sao Paulo. My name is Jim Wynn. I'm Chief Education Officer at Promethean, and it's my job today to start the debate off. EFF, as we call it, tries and is unique. It has live audience. It has a live remote audience brought to us by Cisco's telepresence. It also merges live IPTV, so people, if they're on the internet, can watch this. It's more than broadcast. It's broadcast on over the web. We also merge blogging, tweeting, Facebook, and so on, and we have a team of people listening to those feeds and feeding them to the people on the debate. So uniquely, it isn't just a group of people on a stage talking at people. There's a way of getting back. So the reason why I asked you all to put your phones on silent is that if you want to tweet, then please tweet during the debate. Last time, we reached 250,000 people through tweets during just 2 hours of the debate. It really can reach a big audience. To open today's debate, I'd like to hand over to the Minister of Education from Zimbabwe, David Coulthard. David.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. One of the defining moments in the struggle against apartheid took place on the 16th of June, 1976, when Hector Peterson was killed after South African students protested against the implementation of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in secondary schools in South Africa. The policy enacted then by the apartheid government without consulting the very people it affected the most forever changed South Africa and indeed the world. That example is perhaps one of the more dramatic examples of the need for governments to consult young people in the formulation of education policy. But this principle and the lesson learned on that terrible day applies to every country and every educational system throughout the world. Sadly, young people have often been ignored in the formulation of education policy, but they have a right to be heard, and what is more, provide a very important perspective in the formulation of education policy. The debate this morning, I think, will include a variety of topics in this regard, but I think three in particular. Firstly, we need to involve students in the formulation of our curricula, in the development of curriculum throughout the world in its review and reform. In this regard, in Zimbabwe, we last reviewed and reformed our curriculum way back in 1986, and this year we start a process of reviewing our existing curriculum and reforming it. And it is critical, in my view, that we involve young people in this process. Secondly, technology is overtaking the world and is having in itself a dramatic impact on education. It is true that young people have shown themselves to be far more adept in embracing new technologies. And so it is critically important that they be involved in the application of technology in education. And thirdly, we need to involve students more in the governance of schools. We need to develop a student leadership model, democratically elected representatives who will be involved in policy making at school level, at district level, at provincial level, and at national level. Aside from the importance to education, it is critically important that we do that in the interests of promoting democracy in the world, because there is no better way of promoting democracy than by implementing it in our schools. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Gavin Dykes to pursue these themes.
Thank you very much, David. That's a great start to our debate. I just would remind you all that of the tweeting, and if you are tweeting, by the way, to use hashtag EFF6, sorry, hashtag EFF6 in your tweets so that we can track them later. And to remind you also that we do have people on telepresence who are going to join the debate shortly, but we also have, this debate has been live streamed, so people are joining by live stream, and all of you are able to contribute questions or points by using their tweets and the hashtag. So with that, I'd like to call in our first speaker from overseas, if you like, or who is speaking from overseas. And that first speaker is Sarah Hassan, who's the Education Program Officer at Taking It Global. Sarah.
So thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, Education World Forum, Promethean, and Cisco for providing this opportunity to amplify learner voice today. So learner voice is gaining ground as an important topic within education circles, where learners have a right to express their opinions and be involved in making decisions that affect them. Doing this not only ensures that all voices are heard at the decision-making table, but also provides a pathway for redefining education in the 21st century to ensure that learners develop the skills they need to navigate through the world that they are going to inherit. For many learners today, what is currently being taught in the classroom does not reflect the reality of the world that they live in. With the rise of global challenges like climate change, the rate at which new technologies allow us to communicate across borders to share information and co-create knowledge, and a labor market that requires more self-directed and creative entrepreneurs, we need to create an education system that meets today's changing global environment. And this can begin by asking students what they see for their future and what they need in their education. Including learner voice and dialogue about what they want to learn can move curriculum design from something that is developed by experts based on a future that was seemingly predictable to one that better reflects local and global realities of today's learner. More so, curriculum may not feel something that is imposed upon students, but something that is shared and co-created. Similarly, by asking students how they want to learn, we may learn that students may not need to be incentivized through high grades and expectations set for them, but through trusting and supporting learners to develop expectations of themselves. More so, supporting educational experiences that encourage learners to ask questions based on real-life scenarios, look for creative and new ways to understand diverse global issues, to communicate with others across borders to gain multiple perspectives, and to collaborate with their peers to develop answers, puts learners in the driver's seat of their education and helps nurture the skills they need to meet the demands of our changing world. In this way, asking learners what and how they want to learn supports their capacity rather than reinforces their dependency. So where to begin? Technology presents a clear way where learners can take a leading role as innovators and initiators in education-related change. As some of today's earliest adopters, technology presents an area where learners can amplify their voice to share their ideas and engage in educational experiences that bridge the classroom to the outside world. Similarly, including learner voice in education policy forums like today at Education World Forum, and investing in the resulting ideas encourages learners to practice and assume leadership roles, to develop a sense of active citizenship that transcends from both their schools to their local and global communities. In essence, by amplifying learner voice and having learners engage in their education now, there's greater potential for education to cultivate young people who are inspired, informed, and involved in problem solving for the future. So what do we hope from policymakers today? We hope that all research and policy decisions that are created are accessible and proactively communicated to learner communities around the world. We hope that professional learning programs are developed for both school and board level administration to include learner voice in meaningful ways in policy decision making. We hope that student leadership models are created that places students in democratically elected forums at various levels, both in the school, board, and within governments. And finally, we hope that students are provided the financial support and mentorship that they need to strengthen student-led initiatives and ideas that strengthen school communities and support engagement in learning objectives. As an example, our organization, Taking It Global, is currently supporting the growing awareness and the importance of learner voice by creating an online course to support educators to integrate these ideas into their classrooms, as well as launching a new certification program entitled Future Friendly Schools, where learner voice will be one of 3 key values that schools will need to be both recognized and part of a global network to share best practices. We're very excited to be able to engage with you today and to hear from all of the learners around the world who have exciting and innovative ideas on how to create an education for our 21st century. So we thank you very much for this opportunity and are looking forward to a great debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's excellent. And going on from Sarah, we now come a little closer to home here, and Michael Lack, who's a student at Uplands Community College in the UK, is going to respond to Sarah's presentation.
Hello everyone, it's good for you all to be here today. I just want to say I'm happy to be part of today's debate and the future of education as a whole. Brief introduction about me, I'm currently a 17-year-old and I'll be going to university next year. Regarding the points that Sarah made, I agree that there are some important issues that really need to be tackled when talking about education. First of all, the curriculum. I read recently in a report that in a classroom, usually only one student actually keeps up with the curriculum. The rest of the class are either behind or in front, and therefore we really need to tailor the curriculum to work for everyone. I agree that we also need to work on educational experiences and make the entire class want to learn and understand how to tackle issues that are facing our world, such as global warming, overpopulation, and how they can tackle these when they become employed and get jobs. And I also believe that one of the problems and things we need to tackle with education is that often we teach how to deal with problems in theory, but not in reality. And therefore, we need to somehow educate our students more on how the world actually works, more than what we teach at the moment, a theoretical way of how everything works. Overall, I just hope in this debate we can really tackle the issues that really need to be addressed in higher education, such as higher education, education for all, and the use of technology in education as a whole, and basically get the entire world connected in education. And hopefully allow students like myself to have an active role in our education and our futures.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent. And therefore, let me take you in the last of these contributions, take you all the way to Kenya. And we have Agneta Nyalita, who's a social entrepreneur and fellow and Education Fast Forward Fellow and independent education consultant. I've got that completely wrong. I'll take that again. And a promoter of... She's just changed her job, and she is now a promoter of sustainable development initiatives. Forgive me. Agneta, I hope you've managed your change of role.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I would like to agree to Sarah's contribution about taking education to the next level. And one of the things which I would really commend about is, given that the world has become a global village, how do we also create global learners? How do we create people who are really, really very motivated to take up any job across anywhere across the world? And this is one of the things which I think it's very important to have real case examples right from primary school up to university level, not only in university level. We have youth unemployment set to rise by 12.9% in 2017. How are we going to create people who are going to take those jobs and move to the next level? And one of the things which I think it's very important is making sure that people understand world cultures. And how do we do this? One of the things is through international volunteering, exchange programs for young people, creating policies and addressing policy gaps across the world, which actually impair the different challenges the young people experience. And through this, they're able to understand global cultures because they'll be working with people across the world. And through understanding these cultures, they'll be able to work comfortably and have maximum impact. The other thing is also about curriculum design. There's a need to move from creating a curriculum which creates dependency into a curriculum which opens the mindset of people across the world. as, for example, a curriculum which enhances entrepreneurship. Instead of having guys come from campus and going to look for jobs, how about someone comes from campus and creates 100 jobs? That's something I think as most developing countries and developed countries we need to think about. About the technology, we need to really use technology to our advantage. One of the things I think advantages we have, especially with Facebook, Twitter, and Skype, we can always have teachers do Skype classes, and then learners ask instant questions across the world and get instant answers. That's what we need to use technology for. The other thing is we need to encourage a culture of coaching, learnership coaching, rather than just going to classroom and pressurizing learners to learn things of the past. We need to coach learners rather than just teach them. That's one of the policy issues which need to be addressed. And then one of the challenges I would like to pass to the learners is we need also to use technology to our advantage, and also the globalization changes. One of the things is changing attitude, having a positive attitude towards education and towards global movement. For example, I just moved to South Africa, as Gavin has just talked about, and right now I'm promoting sustainable development at the University of Venda in South Africa, and I'm all the way from Kenya for 2 years as a VSO volunteer. How about having such more of young people moving to that level and getting to understand new cultures and influencing policies? That's something we need to really think about. To the educators, there's one thing which we need to really have into the classroom. Yes, we have the curriculum design, but we also need to think of the changing world. Teaching students to think 20 years from now, and also the teachers having to think 20 years from now. Policymakers think 20 years from now. Create job creators rather than people who are going to be absorbed into the job market. And on maximizing the impact of learners, I think it's important for the learners to be engaged in terms of curriculum development, policy impacting, and have at least empower them to understand what is this thing about policy. Do they really understand about policy, really? And the other thing is also have policies which encourage learners to go for courses which they have passion in. I remember, for example, when I was going to university, I was supposed to do education, but it was not part of my passion. My passion was changing, impacting communities. And I went for a different cause. Okay, my parents were not happy about it, and that's not what I was supposed to do, but it was so expensive. We need to also think about, the policy makers and the government needs to think about how to subsidize some of these educational courses so that students don't have to suffer a lot. In my organization, Partnership for Growth Foundation, we really expose learners, students right from primary and young people to access information. Given that we're moving to a globalized world, we need to think about enhancing access to information, both to the people in the rural areas and also in the urban areas. And to close up with that, I think I will close up with encouraging every one of us to create a generation of socially responsible young people, old people, and kids, so that we are able to have sustainable development in this world. Thank you very much.
Agnetha, thank you. Excellent. Thank you for all those presentations. I now can throw the debate open. So if you have a question, either here or at any one of the TP centres, please indicate to me that you have a question or a comment to make. If you have those, could you please ensure that they are concise? We've a limited time for debate, so if you can keep them reasonably short, that'd be great. Yep, there's, I think, a gentleman over there. Could you
Thank you very much. May I introduce myself? I am the Minister for Education from Pakistan, the government of Sindh. And I had attended the World Forum last year as well, and I learned a lot. Here I have heard young learners commenting upon the policy decision makers' initiatives. But there's a big question. This is my comment, and maybe other leaders who are involved in the policy decision making must be aware. Countries like Pakistan have a big problem. That is that, policy decision making has got the political will. But the real issue is the implementation of those policies. It's a big issue. We have been trying to bring change in the education through technology and incidentally through Promethean. But the bureaucrats sitting in our ministry, they don't have any idea. Although the one secretary had accompanied me last year, he attended the debate show, saw everything. We had meeting with the Promethean people. But the issue is that they don't know what is this. There must be awareness or capacity building for the implementers also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent point, I think, building on what has been said before. Have we another question?
At the front here.
One question, just the row in front. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Riley from the British Council in Sri Lanka. It's a question for the Minister, actually. I know ministers are used to being put on the spot. I'd be interested to know, you mentioned the curriculum review process that's about to commence in Zimbabwe. How are you involving or aspiring to involve learners and young people in that review process?
Okay, I'm going to take one more contribution and then I'm going to go to the people who spoke and see if we can get a response.
And Gavin, can I just say that on your chair, when you came in, on the back of the piece of paper, we'd like, if you have time, to tell us about the things that you're already doing, and we'll feed that into the debate afterwards. So that would be great if you could fill that in at some point. Thank you.
And we have one question at the front on the left here. Hello?
Down here. Jody.
Microphone down here.
That's it.
Okay, my name is Rebecca. I'm British Council Namibia. I'm very impressed by Coulthard quotation or starting point of 16th of June 1976. And I just want to find out, and I think we should debate, because that's the core of the language policy in Africa. And I'm just wondering what kind of lessons we should take from that experience, that young people should not have to die because the language policy was not right for education or there was lack of consultation. We still have issues of English in Africa. We do meet at IATEFL to talk about issues of English in Africa, whether it is for educational purposes or whether it's still a continuation of colonialism in Africa. So language is very important in education. And we have already learned that language is a weapon through which people hand their cultures. So when you are using your language to hand your own culture, in the midst of multilingualism in Africa, we ought to be sensitive towards those issues. So I think subsequent language policies should take consultation, should take the sentimentality and sensitivity that surrounds language in order to educate. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'd like to go with the first question, just the comments from the Minister of Pakistan and how the distinction between policy making and then the implementation of policies and the challenges that are there. And I would like to ask our maybe Sarah first, I should say, in Toronto, if you had any comments about that and making those links, and indeed any of the other young people who are at various TP centres around the world. Sarah.
Thank you, Gavin. So in response to the Minister of Education from Pakistan and thinking about bridging the gap between policy making and policy implementation, I think part of it is awareness and of understanding what the policy says and in what ways students can then contribute to that debate. I think part of it is that, for example, in our context, we may not know what are the policies being made about education, about curriculum design, about pedagogical practices, and until that's communicated, we won't be able to understand and how to begin to better address and implement this. So I think there's a communication gap that can be better addressed to be able to begin supporting the implementation.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any of the other TP units who'd like to contribute here?
Hello. I'd also like to respond to the Minister of Pakistan's question. And my belief is that these implementations don't have to be so drastic. They do not need to... Sorry, I'm speaking from São Paulo, by the way. From what I understand, the students being able to have a control of their curriculum is a big implementation to make. But I'd like to say that to have learners' voice in your education doesn't have to be as drastic as that. As an example, in my education, in certain projects, I'm told your lab report should be on ecology and do any research on that. And I feel that really helps, really keeps me interested in my own education. And so I don't think that we really need to, of course, if it could be done, students having control of their own curriculum would be great, but I don't think it needs to go as far as that. That even smaller steps can also be taken to incorporate learners' voice into education. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. I just give an opportunity for any of the other TPs to come in there, if I may. Anyone want to pick up the ball?
Yeah, I have a comment about that, which has just been said. Well, when we talk about small steps, really, that's all fine and well. But I have a little bit of example that I've actually seen for myself. I'm kind of speaking from Cairo over here, but the example I'm going to talk about is actually in Turkey. What I've heard is they have this national day. It's called the Day of Children and Sovereignty, if I get it correctly. And what they do in this day is they ask all the students from all the schools, this is primary schools, children are 7, 10, even 12, and they ask them to do this world nationwide elections. They pick a prime minister and a president for the country. This is as big as it gets. They pick those people and those children. They run real elections, democratically elected, and they have real programs, they have real schedules for what they're going to do. And once this person wins, this children, this learner, he wins the election, he gets the seat for a prime minister and the president for the country for an entire day. 24 hours where all his decisions are accredited and will be executed. Of course, it's not like the whole nation is going to be at the control of this person, but it's mainly in the field of education and usually environment. Those two fields are highly affect the people, especially the children. So these children and these learners, children or not, or even bigger, they need to control these things in return. They need to give their feedback. And all these decisions, they go straight away. No, the real prime minister that can say, no, this is not going to happen. No, this will go. This person is elected and his voice needs to be heard. Although the entire parliament was also replaced with another parliament elected for only those 24 hours. So this is how big this could get. I mean, we could start with small steps, yeah, but this could get real big and it's going to be real effective in the country. And we can also see how Turkey has raised dramatically within the few 10 years or even 12 years since they have these political changes. That's how big the contributions of the learners can get and can develop a country. So this is a very small example. I'm sure there's a lot of others that people can mention over here, but I just like to mention this so that people would have an idea of how big this thing is, of how effective the learner's contribution can be in pretty much the whole country, not just education, not just the curriculum, everything around it. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohammed. Maybe I can turn to you, Minister, now, and to respond to those two questions, one about curriculum and the other of lessons learned and language.
Thank you, Kevin. I want to make three quick responses. The one was to support something that Agneta from Kenya made regarding the financing of education and the need to consult young people regarding the priorities of governments. And I suspect that if we consulted children the world over, most would rather be well educated than trained up to go to war. And we need to hear the voices of children because internationally insufficient funds are allocated towards education. To turn to the 2 points briefly, the first, the question regarding curriculum review and the involvement of children, of students in that. Very briefly, 3 strategies. The first is that we need to involve, and we intend doing this in Zimbabwe, children in telling us what is wrong with the existing curriculum and to involve them in that review process. Secondly, we intend analyzing how they use technology outside of the classroom. And because they use, certainly in Zimbabwe, technology far more than my generation does. And we need to then apply that in developing our ITC policy. And then thirdly, as we move forward in the reform of the curriculum, a principle which needs to guide us is a principle of broad consultation to involve them in that process of development, identifying which subjects will be taught and how they will be taught. Then turning to my sister from Namibia regarding language policy. You're absolutely correct, madam. It is a critical component of education which has been neglected. Let me tell you what we're doing in Zimbabwe. As we all know, one of the most important building blocks in any child's education is the ability to speak, read, and write that child's mother tongue. And in Zimbabwe, we've neglected that. We've tended to focus on the dominant indigenous languages and English. Our policy recently has been to identify the marginalized indigenous languages, to produce textbooks in those languages, and to ensure that we train up teachers who have the mother tongue of that language and are able to teach it. It is a critical policy in Zimbabwe, and I believe that it is something that will not only improve education throughout Africa, but also promote peace.
It's a very interesting reflection on learner's voice, and it takes us in a slightly different way of thinking about it, perhaps, which is very important. Thank you. Olivia in Australia, I'm surprised we haven't heard from you yet.
What time is it in Australia?
I was just thinking about some of the things that have been said. I think that when it comes down to it, it begins with the education of our educators. I think that perhaps when educators were being educated to be teachers and they would learn to involve student voice and learner voice and encourage their students to grow and learn alongside them rather than just kind of been thrown information and told to learn it. I think that's the biggest thing that is facing us. I was reading earlier that, I can't remember the statistic, but so many students don't find school relevant or important and just feel really disconnected. And I find that particularly sad. I just think that students, we have so many problems coming towards us in the next couple of years, and really it comes down to our generation and us as a group of young people. So really I think that getting this engaging students and learning as a team and just feeling more connected in the classroom would be the first step in making sure that we, as leaders of tomorrow, can take that step forward and deal with the issues that will be facing us.
Thank you, Olivia.
Kevin?
Excellent. Yes?
Riel here in Paris.
Go on, Riel.
Can I dive in?
Yes.
I think you just did.
Good morning to everybody. Riel Miller from Paris, head of foresight at UNESCO. First of all, I want to say big congratulations to Jim and Michelle on picking this issue. I think it's a really central question. And I also want to congratulate them on the way I think it's been framed, which is it's not a student voice. It's not purely a consultative voice, meaning some sort of input, although that's very important. It's about learner's voice. And I just want to highlight the issue because it's just come up with respect to the classroom. and with respect to the way in which we can modify classroom activities and attitudes so that we can encourage learner voice. But that's still an inside-in perspective, and it won't surprise you, and I'll be brief, Gavin, that the outside the classroom, including the technological, the digital, but also the community-based activities that create learning environments and learning situations, how to take that into account more effectively. And the point that I want to make, it's a fairly, I think, critical one, which is a learner's voice depends on having the ability to know you're learning. It depends on the learner's voice within, not just the incentives and disincentives outside. And I think there's a critical question here about the classroom and about the current incentive systems and metrics that we use around learning that perhaps inhibits what we're hoping to achieve because it doesn't create sufficient awareness or value for the learner's voice within. Because it's that learner's voice within, the ability to recognize my ignorance and to recognize when I am doing something to change that ignorance, that allows me to have a learner's voice, express it, and then make it louder, perhaps, so that others can hear it. Thanks.
Thanks, Rio. Let me come back to the audience here, and perfect timing. And let's we'll take a couple of questions, so after this, the gentleman at the back.
Good morning. Is it working? Yes. My name is Haif Banayan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Queen Rania Teacher Academy. In fact, it's not a question, it's a comment about the previous dialogue. I'm hearing a lot from different governments and different ministers about policies, and we're also hearing about the students' involvement. And back to His Excellency, the Minister of Education in Pakistan, talking about implementation, I cannot help but feel that a major aspect of how to get this implementation done is not looked upon enough, which is teachers' qualifications and teachers' preparedness in order to undertake this. Because we're talking about new concepts, and if you talk to anybody around the world about the importance of involving students, no one would disagree about that. Everyone would definitely agree about that. But I think there is a certain level of maybe not knowing how to go about it. And we cannot stay at the top talking about policies at the levels of ministers and then having a group of students and a group of organizations talking about importance of students' engagement and not having the link, which is the people on the ground really well prepared in order to understand and to be implementing that. And I think having worked in development for a very long time in Jordan, I've realized that the winning aspect in order to do this is really to work with the teachers and the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Haif. If we can go to the gentleman at the back.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Tim Gopi Singh, the Minister of Education from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Sincere congratulations on this program. In the reformation or rewriting of curriculum, or the reform of curriculum and the students' involvement, what's the process in terms of if we want to rewrite a primary school curriculum or a secondary school curriculum? Do we engage the students in the primary school setting as they are? Or do we take some students who have just passed through the system and who have had the experience and to determine what they have seen as major difficulties? The second issue is, a colleague just mentioned the role of teachers in this as well. What about the role of parents and guardians in the whole aspect of curriculum reform and rewriting? Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one further comment here.
Okay, thank you. I'm Tayyip Hayati from Sudan, the director of the National Center for Curriculum and Education Research. My question is that how could we internalize the values like honesty, self-reliance, self-denial, respect of time on the minds of our students? I think our syllabi lack suitable approaches for doing that. I would like to hear a comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll do one more comment to the person next, and then I want to, just so you're warned, people on TP centres around the world, I'm going to come out to you to hopefully get your comments.
Thank you very much. My name is Damaka Makonnen from Ethiopia, Minister of Education of Ethiopia. With regard to values and related matters, I think the issue of ethics and citizenship is a very important subject, considering the curriculum and the related matters, to introduce that values with the context of culture and related matters. My second point is about mother tongue. I agree with the Zimbabwe experience. If you come to Ethiopia, the mother tongue is a fundamental issue, even it is constitutional, to address multicultural society. One of the major intervention method is education, to have the mother tongue access in the education system. For example, in Ethiopia, we are teaching with 24 different mother tongue languages and plus English and the national language Amharic. In this regard, the latest experience from this diversified teaching learning method by mother tongue is a very good experience. I think this is another important one. My last point, when you talk about curriculum, it is true that the participation of kids, students, and parents is very important. But how do we link and synergize with the industry and with the other economic need to have that practical curriculum? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm going to come out, or if you feel you want to respond to any of these things, but just to remind everybody, we're talking about, and forgive my very short summary of the points that you've made, but we're talking about the role of teachers, the process of involvement, how we get people involvement, how we develop skills of interaction, respect of time, and I guess responsibility. And also then about ethics and other sets of skills, ethics and values, and also issues of mother tongue. So if you have comments on the TP units, please fire away.
I've got a few.
Yeah, I think, you're on a TP unit. We're just going to go Michael first, and then whoever was speaking, them second.
I'm going to apply to all the questions in order. So if I can talk to the first gentleman, I agree. First, we have to understand that teachers have a really hard job. They work really, really hard. And it's true that some bits of teaching they find hard to adapt to. Like new areas of teaching, they find hard because they've been taught how to teach in a certain style, and it's hard for them to change all of a sudden. But we have to work with the teachers. We can't just expect them to adopt a new policy and just go, here you go, you have to cope with it. We have to teach them and tell them how to do it. And we have to understand that it's a challenge for them too, not just the students, to adopt this new policy. With regard to the comments by the minister from Trinidad and Tobago, when we're talking about primary school education, obviously we can't allow the students themselves to have a complete, they can't dominate the curriculum completely because the teachers have to, they're too young, so obviously the teachers still have to install values and what they want to teach. But we can still involve them in some way. I remember when I was younger, we had a school council where students would put forward their opinions in primary school so that they could really have a judgment in what they wanted to be taught. But we have to understand that in primary school it's important for the teachers still to, in my personal opinion, still to have the dominant role in like what they need to learn, but the students should have an active input too. And with regard to the minister from Sudan, how to install values, I agree, and this is also to the minister from Ethiopia too. I do the subject of philosophy and ethics, and I feel this is important. It should actually be taught in every school, I feel, because it teaches you about so much, about relative morality, relative cultures, and to understand that people from different cultures, whether they be from Sudan to the United States, we all have different ways of doing things, and we have to learn to work together and respect each other. So I think through the use of ethics and philosophy, we could really help students to understand that we all have to work together in this world, and it's not just what helps one country, it's what helps all countries work together.
Thank you, Michael. We had someone coming in from one of the TP units.
Yeah, Kush from Toronto. Michael touched on a lot of great points. One of them, I mean, I think we've all agreed that the consultation of learners is important, but the question is the how. And when we talk about the how, we look at taking the students that are the most eager and the student leaders that really end up contributing. When we look at things like student councils, like Michael mentioned, or democratically elected student representatives, in Ontario we have student trustees, Ontario, New Brunswick, and Canada. These two provinces, we have legislated positions of student trustees, and they are generally high-performing, already involved students. And so what they contribute is definitely important, but it's not always a completely accurate representation of learner voice, and it's certainly not all-encompassing. So the way we capture student voice has so many times been the physical voice, in a forum, in person, at an event. And we've seen through Facebook and Twitter that the real student voice goes on in writing. A lot of students are not as comfortable speaking up in person as they are speaking, through social media, and they are, writing something on Facebook and Twitter. Because that's when you hear a student say, why am I memorizing for this exam when I'll leave it at the door as soon as I walk out? That's when you hear a student say, when am I ever going to use this in real life? You see that on Facebook and Twitter. Now, obviously, there's issues with moderation and having that directly for the policymakers to view. But the accessibility of student voice is so important because it has to be open. It can't just be the student leaders that are contributing. Over here in York Region, we address this through Can Youth, a student forum that's open to article submissions, where the content is moderated, but it's kept of essence and it's not massaged. But the policymakers see exactly what the students are thinking through writing. Because it's one thing to open up to student voice and another thing to engage as many students as possible in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution.
Can I make some contribution from Nairobi?
If you do it very quickly, you've got just a minute. But please go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. I'm Joseph from Nairobi. I just want to make a contribution towards the understanding of this, what student voice is. Look, student voice is not anything that's moving towards a drastic change of, bringing anything that is falsy on the imposition of educators and institutions. Student voice is like advocating, to bridge the gap between educators and students. Most times, like, if you can go to some schools, there are some problems affecting students, but they are not given the opportunity to speak their voice or what is bugging them. So at the end of the day, you find out some students do drop out of school. And if we have a very high increase of students dropping out of institution, thinking about the rise of global challenges, which not only NGO workers can solve it or government workers can solve it, but students themselves can bring their own views together so that they can work in partnership to this leading individuals so that they can solve the problems. Like, let me just bring a short story. In Sierra Leone, where I come from, and in my school, in Bombe High School, there was a time this student, anytime he goes to class, he feels boring. He leaves the class. Anytime he goes to school, he feels boring. And then I asked him, I said, why is it that anytime you go to school, you always leave before time? And then he said, well, actually, the school system is very boring. No activity like football, theater activities and other things. So later I decided, I said, okay, that's fine. And at the end of the day, I came to the class and asked, what is some of the problems you are facing in this class? And they said, oh, the classroom is very boring. Nothing is happening. Teachers just come, they teach and they leave. And that is making some of our friends feel very disinterested in learning. And so they said, okay, what is the best way? I was serving as a kind of mediator. I did not let them attack their teachers or even go on board to say things as against the will of the curriculum. And then they said, okay, if we can have ourselves organized into something like theater, where we can do certain activities involving other activities, like in the area of health, there was an outbreak of cholera in Sierra Leone where 300 people passed away. It was, when you talk of cholera, a disease in a place, they talk about WHO. It becomes the business of WHO. Now look, WHO is just an organization of few individuals who cannot tackle something affecting millions of people in the country. But if you bring students on board to be actively involved in a situation like attacking cholera, if you educate the students, if you give them voice to be participating in an activity, definitely they are going to reach their parents. And when they reach their parents, that means they are going to be affected. Now they have an idea of tackling cholera, not only becoming the responsibility of WHO leaders or NGO or World Vision. So that's why we think student voice is very, very important.
I don't think you're going to
They
stop,
can always
but I think
take
you're
action.
going to have to in a minute.
Yeah, thank you.
Joseph, I'm delighted. Joseph is doing fantastic
Is it too late
work,
to make a comment?
Mohammed, it is time to come in with your closing statement. So you have a few minutes.
Comment too.
So we need
I will
you to
try
do
to
that
make sure I
now.
fit in my comment during the closing.
So a quick closing statement.
Okay. Well, before my closing, first of all, my first problem with the curriculum is that the curriculum is basically set up in a system where there are different forms of intelligence. There are people who are basically good with math, science, and stuff, and the curriculum is set up in a way that it only caters towards kids that are good in terms of when it comes to reading, science, and math. It's not caters towards people that are smart in other ways. Everyone is smart in other ways. So in order to be able to have a better educational system is to have a curriculum that caters towards kids that are not only good at math and science, but kids that have like different forms of intelligence. In regards to my closing, I personally feel like comparing life today with life 5 decades ago, a lot of things have changed. People's goals in life over the years have changed, which means that life itself has changed, which means that education has to change. Our generation is a generation that believes in creating jobs. And because of that, our educational system has to be set up in a way that it will prepare kids to create these jobs in the future. We're talking about technology. We're a generation that has the world at our fingertip, but that doesn't mean the use of technology in the classrooms have changed. Teachers are still not used to using technologies in the classroom, and I feel like that's something that has to change. In order for us to be able to move towards a better educational system, it has to start with like children being really involved at the tender age of like 3 to how as as little as 3 years old, in the way that we have to bring up a new generation of teachers where we teach them a way that it will prepare us for the better futures, because things that adults are worrying about 50 years ago are not that big of a concern for us now. Because back in the day, I think life was basically about, go to school, get married, or get a job. Now things is different. Now it's like we have like global warming, as we've spoken of, we have like all these wars going on. And again, we're a generation that believe in interconnectivity. And in terms of like teaching people a mother tongue, I believe that in order for us to be a better generation, in order for us to be a better world, there has to be a universal language. So yes, it's good to teach people's mother tongues, but I feel like at the same time, we have to teach people an international language, which will help people to connect with each other more. Again, we're a generation that's connected via social networking. And to close, I feel like it doesn't matter where you go in the world. It doesn't matter where you're in Africa, where you're in Europe, or where you're in America. Education system is centered towards teachers, and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be a dictatorship form of government. It should be a democratic system where kids are more involved in learning. If I go to a 2-hour lecture and the professors just pour down their knowledge on me and they don't give me their chance, I just get bored. But if you let it be an interactive system where you allow me to contribute and tell you what I believe, and in that way it gets more interesting. And I believe that, again, in order for us to move better and get a better educational system, we have to bring up a generation of teachers who can incorporate technology into the classroom. It's one thing about having technology, and it's another thing about using technology effectively. We have technologies, but teachers are not using technologies effectively. So the next goal is to have it being used effectively in the classroom. Thank you.
Excellent, Mohammed. Thank you very much.
Gavin,
for
I
that.
just want to
I think we have to stop there, so I'm going to hand over to Michelle at this point. And I apologize, it seems awful to be stopping student voice in a sort of way, but that's not my purpose, you understand. Michelle.
Thank you. So I'm Michelle Sellinger, I'm Director of Education for Cisco. And I just want to summarise and hand over to Jim for the final word. once I won't get it. The world is changing, I think, and the future is very unclear. We know that. Olivia's mentioned it, and Mohammed has also made that point. What is clear, though, is that schools are preparing young people for the certainty of an uncertain future. And these young people will be the leaders in that uncertain world. So today they've demonstrated that we should give them that opportunity to start to shape the direction of their education and to begin that leadership journey now, that we shouldn't wait until they've completed school. Jim.
Thanks, Michelle. 3 years ago, we were talking about how we might have a different form of debate. At the forum here, you come along and you listen to people on the stage and you go off to the next debate and so on, but we wanted something that would have life. And so we invented Education Fast Forward, which would be an amalgamation of the physical, what we have here, and the telly and the virtual, but it would continue. The debate would go on afterwards. So this is just the beginning of this debate. It isn't when we walk out the door, it's finished. So work out how to use Twitter if you don't know how to use it already. Hashtag EFF6 is this debate, but EFF debate is the longer debate. Look us up on Facebook, Google EFF, and you'll find us somehow, and that debate will keep going. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes to keep that going, because we just want to make action happen. And I'm really pleased to announce today that there will be a fund available that we'll announce. I'm not going to tell you the URL. You'll have to find it by Googling it. There will be a place, if you've been stimulated by something you've heard today and you want to take some action, there will be a fund you can bid against. That fund's provided by Cisco, by my company Promethean, and by Nesta in the UK. And that will last for 3 years. I'd like to thank all the people that have made today happen. There's a lot of people behind the scenes. I'd like to thank David for starting the debate off so well, and the whole team and all the technology people behind the scenes who've done us really well today. But this is just the beginning of this debate going forward. And if you don't take part going forward, then we've all wasted our time today. So thank you for coming, and please continue this debate and bid against the fund when you can see it. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
There's been a lot of talks and no walks. But with a young group and an energetic audience like yourself, I hope you will not only walk and talk, but take the lead to run.
Education Fast Forward is trying to reinvigorate the debate, but precipitate action and make things change and move faster forward. It's trying to get that spectrum of culture, geography, gender, age to the debate. Use all the technology that we can to reach a wider audience. Have the great and good, but nurture the young.
One of the great things of Education Fast Forward is not only bringing together these fantastic people from all four corners of the world without them having to travel and give up their very precious time, but the way we do it is very carbon neutral. Nobody can say that the ideas that they've got will only work in this culture or that culture, because what we're doing is bringing a range of cultures together.
Whether you talk about productivity, creativity, assessment, authenticity, it's got to mean a change in policy, and that's really what we're telling people.
It's not about doing things to people, it's about doing things with people. Participation is the key. So making a contribution through tweeting, making a contribution through being part of the debate and making your voice heard, any part of that is worthwhile.
So the technology is an incredibly efficient way of making sure that the audience does have a voice.
I have a belief that you can give a man the world and the world will crumble. Or if you give a man an education, he will rebuild that world.
Everyone is welcome to the next Education Fast Forward debate, EFF6. It's really important that you take part. We want as many people as possible feeding back their ideas. You'll enjoy it and you'll be heard. So please take part in EFF6.